Tonight, we follow the heated debate at the G20 summit over U.S. President Donald Trump's proposed peace plan for Ukraine, as Kiev's allies push to safeguard its sovereignty and security. We will also examine the widening international backlash over Israel's actions in Gaza and the occupied West Bank, from ceasefire violations and settler attacks to fresh accusations of genocide. Join our special coverage on Qnews, where we tackle the latest developments around the world. U.S. President Donald Trump has said that Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky will eventually need to accept the U.S.-backed peace plan aimed at ending the conflict with Russia. Trump noted that despite his strong relationship with Russian President Vladimir Putin, resolving the war requires two to tango, which means that both parties involved in a situation or argument are equally responsible for it. He stressed the urgency created by winter, rising casualties, and repeated strikes on Ukraine's energy grid. The draft plan would require Kiev to cede territory, limit its military, and abandon NATO ambitions. Trump said that he had warned Zelensky earlier that he lacked the leverage to secure a settlement entirely on his own terms. U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance has said that any proposal to end Russia's conflict with Ukraine must safeguard Ukrainian sovereignty and be acceptable to both sides. In a post on X, he argued that it is unrealistic to believe that Ukraine could win simply by receiving more U.S. funding, weapons, or additional sanctions on Russia, calling that notion a fantasy. National security advisors from France, Britain, and Germany will meet U.S., EU, and Ukrainian officials in Geneva tomorrow to discuss Washington's proposed Ukraine peace plan. A U.S. official confirmed that U.S. Army Secretary Daniel Driscoll has already arrived in Geneva, with a Ukrainian delegation due later tonight, while envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will join tomorrow. A German source said that a European draft peace plan based on the U.S. proposal has been sent to Kiev and Washington. In a joint statement, European leaders said that a proposed 28-point U.S. peace plan for Ukraine offers key elements needed for a fair and lasting settlement, but still needs further reinforcement, or rather refinement. Meeting alongside the G20 summit in Johannesburg without U.S. President Donald Trump's participation, they stressed that the draft provides a workable foundation, yet requires more negotiation. The leaders of France, Canada, Italy, Germany, UK, and the EU reaffirmed that borders cannot be changed by force, expressed concern over suggested limits on Ukraine's military, and signaled readiness to engage closely with Kiev and Washington to ensure any future is durable. Earlier, G7 nations and European leaders, including European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa have convened on the sidelines of the G20 summit in Johannesburg to discuss the U.S. proposed peace plan for Ukraine. The E3 security group, France, Britain and Germany, met ahead of the broader discussion, joined by Finland, Norway, Spain and the Netherlands. That comes while the U.S. and Russia negotiate a 28-point roadmap to end the conflict. Brussels has been excluded. Von der Leyen pledged outreach to Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky, who expressed readiness for constructive and prompt cooperation with Washington. Kiev held consultations in Switzerland on the plan. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz has said that he told U.S. President Donald Trump during a lengthy phone call that Europe must be directly involved in any effort to end the Russian conflict with Ukraine. Speaking after the G20 summit in Johannesburg, Merz warned that a Ukrainian defeat would deeply destabilize European politics and the continent's security. He stressed that this threat is why Europe remains firmly engaged and said that he clearly conveyed this position to Trump. For further analysis, we're joined from Moscow by the political scientist and former advisor to the Russian President Vladimir Putin, Mr. Sergei Markov. Mr. Markov, welcome to Q News. Sir, how do you interpret President Donald Trump's assertion that Zelensky will eventually need to accept the U.S.-backed peace plan?
I think Donald Trump model how he sees the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. It's based on his experience as a real estate businessman in New York. It's like he constructed hotel and this hotel has no chance to be profitable. So reasonably to sell this conflict, not just to give up. Same, he believes that Ukraine has no chance to win the war against Russia. That's why he believes that this war should be stopped. The United States is their ally of Ukraine, and they believe that now it's the best condition for the peace deal to make it as soon as possible, because in the future more Ukrainians will be killed and more territory of Ukraine will be taken by Russian army. So it's a very simple approach. Now we can see a lot of talks in Europe and Great Britain that it's capitulation of Ukraine. It's absolutely not. Capitulation in Ukraine meaning that Kyiv, its Russian capital during 3 centuries, Kharkov, Odessa, Zaporozhye, Nikolaev, Dnipropetrovsk, all these Russian cities should join Russia. This is a Ukrainian capitulation, but this is very sensitive compromise for Russia. And also we should add that Russia very strongly demand that de-Russification by terror should be stopped. It means that prohibition of Russian language should be abolished, prohibition of Orthodox Church should be abolished, and also neo-Nazi groups which making terror in Ukraine should be prohibited and disarmed. So this is a Russian additional demands. And Donald Trump tried to find a compromise.
So what would accepting a plan that cedes territory and limits Ukraine's military mean for Kiev's sovereignty and long-term security?
First of all, Russia don't regard Ukraine as sovereign country. Now, Russia believes that Ukraine now new colony of Western countries. It's combination of United States, Great Britain, and European Union. So preserving sovereignty of Ukraine doesn't mean preserving of neo-colonial regime. Of course, the masters of this neo-colonial regime, European and British politicians now, they very much want to preserve this neo-colonial regime. But Russia believes that sovereignty of Ukraine should be happen normally. Ukraine was sovereign country between 1991 and 2014. We should remember that in 2014, intelligence services of Western countries overthrown last democratic president of Ukraine and imposed repressive Russophobic regime. But before this coup, neo-Nazi coup, Ukraine had zero problem with Russian security. So Russian suggestion very easy. Let's move political system of Ukraine to the situation between 1991 and 2014. It means that will be absolutely zero security problem. If Ukraine anti-Russia, never Ukraine will have security from Russia, because Russian would like to crash anti-Russia for sure. But if Ukraine normal, democratic, and independent country, those Ukraine will live nearby Russia with happiness and peace.
So to what extent does J.D. Vance's stance reflect a broader shift in U.S. thinking on Ukraine's sovereignty and war aims?
We very much support sovereignty of Ukraine because we believe that current neo-colonial repressive regime should be replaced by sovereignty. When Ukraine was sovereign country from 1991 to 2014, it had zero problem with Russia. So if Vance idea, let's move Ukraine back to sovereignty, it's fully supported by Russia. But if Vance idea to preserve neo-colonial repressive terroristic regime, which imposed by Western countries to Ukraine right now, Russia will be very strongly against this. But Vance give it very paradoxically. He called, we should preserve sovereignty of Ukraine. But it does not exist, sovereignty of Ukraine. Ukraine, neo-colonial regime.
So what do tomorrow's Geneva talks between U.S., EU, and Ukrainian officials suggest about the urgency of the peace process?
About urgency, it's interest of Ukrainian people, first of all, because look, exchange of the bodies between Russia and Ukraine. Proportion of them usually one kill Russian soldiers to the 35 kill Ukrainian soldiers. Probably are killing much more than Russian soldiers. And so if immediate peace deal, it means the saving life of Ukrainian people and preserving some of the territory under the control of Ukraine. So immediate plan is interest of Ukraine, but of course not interest of Zelensky. Zelensky, enemy of Ukraine, and Zelensky, enemy of Ukrainians. Ukrainians want peace as soon as possible. Zelensky wants to continue this war, because if war finished, immediately military order finished, new election happened. In this new election, Vladimir Zelensky, who is hated by majority of Ukrainians, will lose his presidential position, and then he will be accused because of corruption. He will be accused why he responsible for the killing half of the millions of Ukrainians. That's why Zelensky, main enemy of peace. Zelensky, when Zelensky in power, he will not allow this peace to happen.
Mr. Markov, European leaders say that the 28-point U.S. plan is workable foundation. What key refinements do they likely want?
European leaders, their party of war. European leaders want this Ukrainian war to continue few years because European leaders has interest in Ukraine war. They have few interests and specific. First of all, they need some time to recover military-industrial complex and their army to the high level. Chancellor of Germany, Merz, told, we want German army to be the main army in Europe again. We should ask, why again? When German army was #1 in Europe, it was under Adolf Hitler before World War II and under Chancellor of as the Emperor of German Empire before World War I. So, Chancellor of Germany want Germany to become again great military force in Europe. So it's the interest. And if you look at Macron is preserving power, not to giving power by free election to the mostly popular French political leader, who is Marine Le Pen, right-wing politician. He is mostly popular. Macron now arrested her, and Macron used this war against Russia and Ukraine as pretext for the keeping arrest of his opponent Marine Le Pen. Leaders of European Union, they cherish such politicians like Hungarian leader Orban and Slovakian leader and Czech leader who preserving their independence. European Union Commission want to suppress sovereignty of the countries, and they want to use this Ukrainian war against Russia for the proving of their non-democratic, repressive methods against sovereignty of specific European countries. So they have, European leaders have specific interest to continue this war. But this, of course, in strong alliance with Zelensky, who is major enemy of Ukraine, but in strong contradiction with majority of Ukrainians who crying, please give us the peace. Ukrainians now will be ready to recognize Donald Trump as their leader, because Ukrainians want peace as soon as possible. And you can see as a video from Ukrainian streets every day, during 2 years, every day, that Ukrainians is resisting to attempt to capture them and to mobilize them and to send to the war against Russia. Ukrainians does not want to continue the war. Zelensky used them only by keeping their families as by keeping their families in these hands of authorities.
Mr. Markov, how important is von der Leyen's outreach to Zelensky in ensuring Kiev remains fully involved in shaping any deal?
Territories. Russians don't fight for territories. Russia fighting for the very simple goal, not to have anti-Russia on the place of Ukraine. I should remember, again, that Kiev was Russian capital during three centuries. And the leaders of Soviet Union, Leonid Brezhnev, Nikita Khrushchev, half of leaders of Soviet Union was from Ukrainian territory. And Ukraine was part of the Russia more than 1,000 years. Not 1,000 years ago, but all this period of more than 1,000 years, Ukraine was part of the Russia. And native language of the 70% of Ukrainian people, this is Russian language. They are Russians. And now Western countries want to make, by terror, to make anti-Russia. So Russia fighting not for territories, but Russia use military pressure and taking territory as pressure for demanding Western countries to accept Russian demands. It means stop project anti-Russia by terror nearby the Russia.
Well, from Moscow, that was Mr. Sergei Markov, political scientist and former advisor to the Russian President Vladimir Putin. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us here on Q News. And now we move on to the latest developments in Gaza.
And then, of course, we have the host tonight, and I just want to thank you very much. It was a reason we chose Egypt, because you were very helpful, and very, very helpful. Everybody wanted to have this, but we really thought it was appropriate, and you are a great leader. And he's a fantastic man and a fantastic general, by the way. But he's a great, great president, and I want to thank Egypt and all of your representatives for treating us all so well. Thank you very much.
New York Mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani has openly accused the Israeli government of committing genocide and criticized the U.S. government for financing it.
I've spoken about the Israeli government committing genocide, and I've spoken about our government funding it. And I shared with the president in our meeting about the concern that many New Yorkers have of wanting their tax dollars to go towards the benefit of New Yorkers and their ability to afford basic dignity.
The office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has accused Hamas of violating the Gaza ceasefire. It said that Israeli forces had killed 5 senior Hamas commanders in response to what it described as an attack by the group on Israeli troops. Netanyahu's office insisted that Israel was fully complying with the ceasefire terms, but claimed that Hamas had failed to uphold its obligations. Earlier, Hamas has accused the Israeli military of bluntly violating the Gaza ceasefire by removing the yellow demarcation line and advancing westward, calling the move a clear breach of the agreement. The movement reiterated its rejection of any attempts by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government to impose new conditions contradicting what was agreed upon. Hamas urged the international community to compel Israel to honor its commitments and stop actions that undermine the ceasefire process. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry has condemned the recent settler attacks in Nablus, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and Al Khalil, calling them a dangerous escalation. It said that the arson, vandalism, and destruction of homes and property reflect a systematic policy aimed at terrorizing Palestinians and enforcing forced displacement in the occupied territories. The Palestinian Foreign Ministry had held Israel fully responsible for these crimes, accusing it of encouraging settler violence. It urged the UN Security Council to act immediately by forming an international peacekeeping force to protect Palestinians across all occupied areas. Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdel Ati has met British National Security Advisor Jonathan Powell on the sidelines of the G20 summit. They discussed developments in the Palestinian cause, with Abdel Ati stressing full implementation of the Sharm el-Sheikh Agreement, early recovery and reconstruction steps, and unhindered humanitarian access to Gaza. He urged coordinated international action to enforce the UN Security Council resolution and expedite the formation of the International Stabilization Force. He also highlighted Egypt's preparations for hosting the Early Recovery and Reconstruction Conference and hoped for UK participation. The meeting also covered Sudan, where Abdel Ati reviewed Egypt's efforts within the quartet to support de-escalation, a full ceasefire, and a political process safeguarding Sudan's unity and stability. For further analysis, we're joined from Cairo by the senior advisor at the European Institute of Peace, Ambassador Hisham Youssef. Ambassador Youssef, welcome to Q News. Sir, how do statements by New York's mayor-elect accusing Israel of genocide affect U.S. domestic politics, and could they shift Washington's posture on Gaza?
Well, we hope that the attitude of Washington and the Trump administration would move in a direction that would be conducive to advancing the prospects of peace. This is the most important element future as far as I know.
Your Excellency, Hamas says that Israel breached the ceasefire by removing the yellow demarcation line and advancing west. What verification mechanism can confirm or refute this quickly, and who enforces compliance?
Well, as a matter of fact, Israel has taken a number of steps that are in violation of the ceasefire agreement. One of them is the one you mentioned about changing the yellow line, but there are many others. Israel is still attacking people, or more than 300 people have been killed since the ceasefire started on the 10th of October until today. Humanitarian assistance not entering Gaza. There are still house demolitions in the areas under the control of Israel. And this is being monitored by the center that is led by the United States and is present in Israel and has a number of countries joining in this center. And we were hoping that the United States would, as a result of this monitoring, be more forceful with Israel regarding these violations.
So if the ceasefire is being tested, what immediate diplomatic levers can compel adherence without collapsing the broader framework?
No, unfortunately, I didn't hear the question. Can you repeat it again?
I would repeat it to Your Excellency. I was asking you if the ceasefire is being tested, what immediate diplomatic levers can compel adherence without collapsing the broader framework?
Well, there is a huge role that has to be played by Egypt, Qatar, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and others who have been working to advance the prospects of peace. Saudi Arabia has been working in the context of the Saudi-French initiative. Egypt, Qatar, and Turkey have been working on the mediation for a ceasefire and so on. And a number of countries, 8 countries, met with President Trump in order to see how they can advance the prospects of peace on the margins of the UN General Assembly. And all these countries have responsibilities in order to ensure that the ceasefire is respected and that we do not move in a direction that would result in further escalation and military action.
Your Excellency, now with settler attacks reported in Nablus, Ramallah, Bethlehem, and Hebron, what obligations do states have under international law to prevent and punish such violence? At least prevent such violence.
Well, this violence has been going on for a very long time. And sadly, the international community has not been acting forcefully enough in order to address this situation. There has been some steps, including some sanctions by a number of European countries against major settler extremists, but all the actions that have been taken until now have not been enough in order to put pressure to bear on Israel to stop these attacks by settlers on Palestinian civilians in the West Bank.
The Palestinian Foreign Ministry wants an international peacekeeping force. How feasible is that now, and what mandate and rules of engagement would be required to protect the civilians effectively?
Well, now we have a Security Council resolution that addresses the stabilization force. And this stabilization force has to have a mandate, and the mandate includes Palestinian protection. This is in accordance to the Security Council resolution. So the question now lies in how this will be implemented, whether the U.S. will allow the stabilization force to have a reasonable mandate that would take into account the requirements of protecting Palestinian people and also the requirements of Israel in order for the military process not to return. So this is the challenge that is facing the United States, the mediators, and the international community to ensure that this stabilization force is a force that would advance stability. Now, there have been some successful efforts before in relation to addressing particularly the issue of disarmament of the armed groups, as this is the priority for Israel. And we can benefit from a number of successful stories, whether it was Northern Ireland, Colombia, or otherwise. So I think that this is that should be followed. We hope that this will continue to go through.
Well, that was Ambassador Hisham Youssef joining us from Cairo. He's the Senior Advisor at the European Institute of Peace. Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for joining us here on Qnews. And this brings us to the end of our special coverage for tonight. But for more stories and live updates, you can always follow Qnews on YouTube, Facebook, X, Instagram, and TikTok at QNewsEG. From all of us here, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for more news and analysis on Qnews.